What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a look at recoil in the Call of Duty franchise, mainly focusing on some Infinity Ward CoDs. And I was basically just curious to have a look at this because I really often see people claim that recoil in more recent Call of Duty games is significantly lower than the older CoD games of the past. Back in the golden age of CoD, like CoD 4, Modern Warfare 2, many people claim there's way less recoil now than back then, and I just wanted to put that to the test to see if this is actually true. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through every single Call of Duty game and every single gun. Instead, what I did for the purposes of this roughly 12-minute video is I chose the accurate assault rifle from several Call of Duty games, as well as a more inaccurate assault rifle from several Call of Duty games, and I wanted to just put them side by side to sort of test that theory out. Now, before we get into the direct comparison, it is important to explain the differences in how recoil works in modern CoDs compared to a lot of older Call of Duty games. So let's just go through the basics of this, keeping in mind there is a lot more nuance to this, and I could get a lot deeper, but it just doesn't fit within the scope of this video, so we're going with more of a general explanation of how this works. In older CoDs, we have view kick as well as gun kick. View kick is how much your camera is going to be moving around, so generally, like if a gun kicks upward, your view will actually be looking upward as you're firing your gun, and then gun kick is how much the gun is actually going to be moving as well, and both of these use the same general logic behind them. For each shot fired, you have your pitch and your yaw, and with this, for each gun, there's a certain specified range of how much the gun could potentially kick upward, as well as how much the gun could potentially kick horizontally. Those are your pitch and yaw values. And while there is a specified range, each shot fired is randomized within that range. So with one bullet that you fire, you might have the maximum amount of pitch and yaw, and therefore you see a huge jump with your recoil, and then the next shot fired, it might be the minimum amount, and there might be essentially zero recoil from one shot to the other. And like I said, this is randomized within a specified range. Now on top of this, we have center speed, and center speed is just the gun essentially always trying to return back to your initial point of aim when you first started firing the gun. And this is an acceleration value, and this is constantly applying any time your point of aim is deflected due to recoil. It's like a magnet always trying to come back down to center. And so if you have a high center speed, your gun is going to return back to your initial point of aim faster, whereas with a low center speed, it's going to take longer to return, and therefore your general recoil pattern will tend to drift more if you have a very slow center speed. So those are the absolute basics of how recoil used to work, and with this, you would tend to see certain trends with guns. So some guns, for instance, might generally kick a little bit upward and to the right, or upward to the left, or whatever it might be, but there was no set trend line. There was no set recoil plot, because for every shot fired, the recoil is completely random within that specified range. As a result, the best you could really do with recoil control is try to counteract that general recoil trend you might see with that gun, and then it's mainly just a reactive sort of recoil control, where if it does kick really strong with one bullet, you might have to counteract that one, and therefore it was a lot less consistent when it comes to recoil control. Now, let's contrast that with the more modern style of recoil that we have in Call of Duty, and they've kind of been moving in this direction over time, but the biggest change came with Modern Warfare 2019. Now, in these modern Call of Duty games, you still have view kick and gun kick. Those are still elements with it. However, now there is more of a set recoil pattern or trend per weapon. So some guns might have sort of like an S-shaped recoil plot, or other ones might be in a straight line vertically or a straight line diagonally. But the main idea behind this is every single time you fire a mag, you're going to see the exact same general recoil trend almost every single time you fire that gun. Now, of course, there is absolutely still some randomness programmed in there. On a bullet-to-bullet basis, there is going to be a bit of deviation from this. But the main idea here is it now follows a very consistent trend line that you can learn and predict and control properly. So those are just the basics to sort of highlight the differences in how recoil used to work compared to how they're working now in Call of Duty. And now let's get into the actual comparison itself. First up, let's start it off with our highly accurate assault rifles. So from Call of Duty 4, or I did the testing in Modern Warfare Remastered, the recoil values are the same with this. I use the M4 carbine, and keep in mind with all of these tests in every game, I'm standing at exactly 15 meters away from the wall. But with this, you can see it's very accurate. There's not a whole lot of recoil, little bit of side to side, but really not much recoil at all. Then let's move into Modern Warfare 2, and everybody's favorite laser beam gun in this game was the ACR, which you can see there's very, very little recoil with this. This thing barely moves at all when firing full auto. After that, we're taking a big leap forward into Modern Warfare 2019, where the biggest recoil change occurred. And I decided to go with the M13 on this one just because it is one of, if not the most accurate full auto assault rifles that came with the game. And as you can see there, it kicks upward and to the right. And then finally, let's have a look at our extremely accurate Vanguard assault rifle. This is the Automaton, which kicks upward with a very, very slight lean to the right, but mainly just straight upward. And putting that all together, I made sure these are all exactly to scale. I had a character model stand directly on the wall. I scaled appropriately for that character model. And again, I was ensuring I was standing 15 meters away for every one of these tests. So these are to scale. At first glance, it actually looks like we're seeing more recoil in modern Call of Duty games than the older ones, at least when it comes to these very accurate assault rifles. Having said that though, in COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2, we didn't have any attachments to improve our recoil, whereas in newer Call of Duty games, we've got tons of attachments to impact our recoil, and obviously we are going to be using a lot of those attachments, so in order to make a more fair comparison, let's have a look at this, but now using the best recoil attachments in Modern Warfare 2019 as well as Vanguard. And as we can see, now it's looking a lot closer between the older Call of Duty games and the more modern ones, but even still, with these attachments in mind, we're still seeing a bit more magnitude of recoil in Modern Warfare and Vanguard. And this result actually surprised me a fair amount because while I do remember the M4 and the ACR being quite accurate, I didn't realize they were that accurate compared to the modern games. But that is only looking at the guns that are designed to be super accurate. Now let's do a different comparison, and with this one, I'm just going to look at the AK-47 in COD 4 first, then Modern Warfare 2, and then finally in Modern Warfare 2019. When it comes to Vanguard, I just couldn't confidently come up with something that would be comparable to the AK-47 for these games, so we're just sticking to the 3 Infinity Ward games here. And with this one, you can definitely see there's more recoil involved with all of the games. COD 4's AK-47 recoil plot is actually kind of crazy and very inconsistent, so controlling that is actually going to be very difficult. And then in Modern Warfare 2, it just seems like a bunch of randomness, but contained within a certain area. You don't know if it's going to kick left or right or what it's going to do, but it doesn't kick like way up to the sky or anything. It does stay within a certain grouping. And then with Modern Warfare 2019, it's a totally different style of recoil that kicks basically straight up with a decent amount of side-to-side bounce. And also, for the first 5 shots fired, there's quite a big gap between each bullet. And that's another thing I should mention with modern Call of Duty games. They have a lot more control over what happens for like the first 5 shots fired compared to the next 5 or the 5 after that or whatever number they determine. They can definitely create very interesting characteristics with recoil. In either case, once again, we're not including attachments here in Modern Warfare 2019, and in order to have a more fair comparison, let's have a look at the AK-47 with good recoil attachments on it. And now it's starting to look a whole lot better in comparison to the other games. In fact, since it's kicking basically straight upward, I would take that Modern Warfare 2019 recoil any day over the other ones because it's so consistent and it's very easy to compensate for straight vertical recoil. Compared to the older games, which had a lower total magnitude of recoil, and it might look like a decent recoil plot, but there's so much randomness programmed into that you end up with a situation where you're being much more reactionary with your recoil control, and therefore you're going to have a much harder time staying on target while firing full auto. So now that we've seen these basic comparisons, is recoil really lower today compared to older Call of Duty games? Well, the first thing I'm going to say here is basically all Call of Duty games have very little recoil, especially when you compare it to many other FPS franchises on the market. No matter which Call of Duty game you choose, there tends to be very little recoil on average with the guns. And if we're just looking at the recoil plots without trying to control recoil or anything, or we're just shooting at a wall, it's not necessarily immediately obvious that modern Call of Duty games have way lower recoil than older games like many people claim. Having said that though, it definitely seems like modern Call of Duty games feel way more accurate than the older Call of Duty games, and I actually feel like this is due to several reasons combined. One of them is, of course, the fact that we have that more predictable and controllable recoil trend with each gun, where it's going to follow that same sort of trend every single time, and therefore you can actually learn these recoil patterns and learn how to control them consistently rather than just reacting to what's happening and then trying to control from there. The second big reason is the attachments we have access to now. We have a lot more control over what's going on with our recoil before we even get into the match. After that, something that I feel a lot of people don't really consider, especially when it comes to controllers, is in newer Call of Duty games, we have a lot more control with the settings on our controller. So our dead zones, for instance, we can have way more control over that, which definitely helps with those very minor corrections that you need while controlling recoil. On top of that, in older Call of Duty games, we didn't have access to aim down sight sensitivity options, which also plays a huge role in controlling accuracy and staying on target while aiming down sight. Finally, another thing that applies to controllers and the feeling of guns being way more accurate in newer Call of Duty games is we straight up have longer aim assist ranges in modern COD games. With Modern Warfare 2019, this is where they massively boosted the range at which you get aim assist with a controller, and that makes a big difference in longer range gunfights and your ability to track and stay on targets in those longer range fights. I guess there's one last thing that just popped into my mind. Another thing we have with modern Call of Duty games that we didn't have back in the day is the ability to mount our weapons. And in doing so, we can massively decrease the amount of recoil that we experience. And I feel especially in something like Warzone, if you end up in one of those situations where you can mount, you can be laser beaming people at like 200 meters. And without mounting, that wouldn't be nearly as possible. So with all of these combined, even if the magnitude of recoil doesn't look like it's significantly different in modern games compared to older ones, I would say that our control over the guns has increased very noticeably over time, and this definitely leads to the feeling of guns being more accurate and controllable now than they were back in the day. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on sort of the evolution of recoil over time in Call of Duty. And I'm just curious to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Did these results surprise you at all? Were you surprised to see the difference in magnitude with recoil? And also, what do you prefer? Do you prefer that more random style recoil from back in the day, where it required much more reactionary recoil control? Or do you prefer the more modern style of recoil, where you can learn those recoil patterns and you can consistently control and predict them? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.